Hey there. Tonight we're going to journey through 50 remarkable moments, discoveries, and oddities from human history. Each one reveals something unexpected about the world our ancestors built and the timeline we inhabit. If you've heard another theory, feel free to share in the comment section. We love discovering new pieces of the story. Do consider tapping or clicking on the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if this sparked a little calm or curiosity. No pressure, only if your finger feels like doing it. Now settle into comfort, let your mind and body relax, and let's explore tonight's topic together. 1. Woolly mammoths were still walking the earth when the Great Pyramid of Giza was being built. While most mammoths vanished around 10,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age, small populations survived on remote islands far longer than anyone imagines. On Wrangel Island in the Arctic Ocean, a population of woolly mammoths persisted until approximately 2000 BCE. That means these massive, shaggy creatures were still alive when ancient Egyptians were hauling limestone blocks into place, when Mesopotamian cities were thriving, and when the first dynasties of China were taking shape. The timeline we carry in our heads often places mammoths in some impossibly distant past, but they were contemporaries of pyramid builders. Their extinction came not from climate alone, but likely from a combination of isolation, inbreeding, and eventually human arrival on their island refuge. It's a reminder that prehistory and recorded history overlap in ways that collapse our sense of time. 2. The last execution by guillotine in France happened the same year Star Wars was released in theaters. On September 10, 1977, Hamida Jandoubi was executed by guillotine in Marseille, marking the end of a method that had symbolized revolutionary justice nearly 2 centuries earlier. That same year, audiences around the world were lining up to watch Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Han Solo battle the Empire in a galaxy far, far away. The juxtaposition feels surreal. While one cultural phenomenon was introducing lightsabers and the Force to popular imagination, another was closing the chapter on a brutal, mechanical form of capital punishment that had defined an era. France abolished the death penalty entirely in 1981, just 4 years later. The overlap between these two events highlights how recently some practices we consider ancient or medieval actually persisted. History doesn't move in neat, separate eras. Modernity and antiquity coexist longer than we assume. 3. Oxford University was teaching students before the Aztec Empire was founded. Teaching at Oxford began around 1096, making it one of the oldest universities in continuous operation. The Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan wasn't founded until 1325, more than 2 centuries later. By the time the Aztecs were building their island city in the middle of Lake Texcoco, Oxford had already produced generations of scholars in theology, law, and natural philosophy. This fact disrupts the mental map many of us carry, where European institutions feel ancient and pre-Columbian civilizations feel even older. In reality, Oxford's halls were filled with medieval students debating Aristotle while the Aztec people were still migrating through central Mexico, searching for the prophesied site where an eagle would perch on a cactus. Both civilizations were building empires of knowledge and power, but on timelines that intersect in unexpected ways. The world's intellectual centers have always been scattered and overlapping, never as linear as textbooks suggest. 4. The fax machine was invented 33 years before the telephone. In 1843, Scottish inventor Alexander Bain patented a device that could transmit images over wires using electrical signals, laying the groundwork for what would become the fax machine. The telephone, by contrast, wasn't patented by Alexander Graham Bell until 1876. This means the technology to send documents across distances existed before the technology to have a conversation. Early fax systems were clunky, impractical, and required synchronized pendulums on both ends, but the concept was there. It took decades for the technology to mature into something commercially viable, but the idea of remote document transmission predates voice communication by a full generation. We think of technological progress as a straight line from simple to complex, but innovation rarely follows that path. Sometimes the complicated arrives first, and the simple comes later. The fax machine's early invention is a reminder that the order of technological development is often stranger than we expect. 5. Ancient Roman concrete was stronger and more durable than modern concrete, and it could even set underwater. Roman engineers developed a mixture using volcanic ash, lime, and seawater that created a chemical reaction forming a rare mineral called aluminum tobermarite. This mineral actually strengthened over time, particularly when exposed to seawater, making Roman concrete increasingly resilient as centuries passed. Structures like the Pantheon's dome and the harbors of ancient ports have stood for 2,000 years with minimal deterioration. According to research from the University of California, Berkeley, modern concrete begins to crack and crumble within decades, especially in marine environments, because it lacks the self-healing properties of the Roman formula. We lost this knowledge for over a millennium. Only recently have scientists begun to understand the chemistry that made Roman concrete so extraordinary. The Romans didn't have steel reinforcement or advanced materials science, yet they built structures that outlasted anything we construct today. Sometimes ancient technology holds secrets we've only begun to rediscover. 6. Sharks have existed longer than trees. Sharks first appeared in the oceans around 400 million years ago, during the Devonian period, while trees didn't evolve until roughly 350 million years ago. This means sharks were already ancient, established predators by the time the first forests began spreading across the continents. They survived multiple mass extinction events that wiped out dinosaurs, trilobites, and countless other species. Sharks witnessed the rise of fish, the colonization of land by plants and animals, the age of reptiles, and the emergence of mammals. Their body design proved so effective that it required little modification over hundreds of millions of years. While trees transformed landscapes and changed the atmosphere by producing oxygen, sharks remained largely unchanged in the depths, perfecting their role as ocean hunters. The next time you see a tree, consider that sharks were patrolling the seas long before that tree's ancestors even existed. Evolution doesn't always mean complexity. Sometimes the first solution is the best one. 7. Ketchup was originally a fermented fish sauce from China, not the tomato-based condiment we know today. The word ketchup likely derives from the Hokkien Chinese word ke tsiap, which referred to a sauce made from fermented fish or shellfish. British sailors and traders encountered this sauce in Southeast Asia during the 17th century and brought the idea back to Europe. Early English ketchup recipes used ingredients like mushrooms, walnuts, oysters, and anchovies, but no tomatoes. Tomatoes weren't added until the early 19th century in America, when someone realized the combination of tomatoes, vinegar, and spices created a shelf-stable, delicious sauce. The tomato version quickly became dominant, and older recipes faded into obscurity. What we now consider an all-American condiment, slathered on burgers and fries, has roots in Asian fish sauce and British experimentation. The transformation from fermented fish to sweet tomato sauce represents how foods evolve through cultural exchange and adaptation. Ketchup's journey across continents and centuries shows that even the most familiar foods often have surprising, complex origins. The bottle on your table is the result of thousands of years of culinary evolution. 8. The can opener wasn't invented until 48 years after cans were introduced. Canned food was patented in 1810 by Peter Durand in England as a way to preserve food for long voyages and military campaigns. The instructions on early cans read, "Cut round the top near the outer edge with a chisel and hammer." Soldiers and sailors used whatever they had available, including bayonets, knives, and rocks, to break into their rations. The first can opener wasn't patented until 1858, nearly half a century later, by Ezra Warner in the United States. Even then, it was a clunky, dangerous device that required significant skill to use without injury. The modern, rotating can opener we recognize didn't appear until 1870. For decades, people struggled with a brilliant preservation technology that was almost impossible to access. It's a perfect example of how innovation often solves one problem while creating another. The solution to getting food into the can arrived long before anyone figured out how to easily get it back out. 9. Indigenous peoples of Australia have inhabited the continent for at least 65,000 years, maintaining continuous culture through the entire rise and fall of every other major civilization on Earth. While the Egyptians built pyramids, the Aboriginal Australians were already ancient. While Rome conquered and fell, while the Maya flourished and collapsed, while the Inca built their mountain empire, Aboriginal cultures persisted. They witnessed climate changes that transformed the landscape, sea level rises that reshaped coastlines, and the extinction of megafauna. Their oral traditions, encoded in songlines and dreamtime stories, contain knowledge passed down through hundreds of generations. These stories include memories of coastal flooding that occurred over 10,000 years ago, verified by geological evidence. No other culture on Earth can claim such continuity. The depth of their connection to land, the sophistication of their ecological knowledge, and the resilience of their societies challenge every Western assumption about progress and civilization. They didn't just survive, they thrived, creating complex social structures and rich cultural traditions that endure. 10. The first photograph of a person was completely accidental. In 1838, Louis Daguerre was attempting to capture a photograph of the Boulevard du Temple in Paris. The exposure time required was so long, around 10 minutes, that moving traffic, pedestrians, and carriages all blurred into invisibility. But one man stood still, long enough to appear in the image. He was getting his shoes shined at the corner of the boulevard, remaining in place just long enough for the early photographic process to capture him. He became the first human being ever recorded in a photograph, frozen in time without knowing it. His name is lost to history. We don't know who he was, where he went afterward, or what his life was like. He's just a faint figure in the lower left of a cityscape, performing an ordinary task on an ordinary day. Every person who walked past him that morning vanished from the record, erased by motion. Only he remains, a ghost in the frame, marking the moment. Photography began to change how we remember the world. 11. The Great Wall of China took over 2,000 years to build, meaning sections constructed at the beginning were already ancient ruins by the time later additions were completed. Construction began as early as the 7th century BCE, with various warring states building defensive walls. The most famous sections, built during the Ming Dynasty, weren't completed until the 17th century CE. That's a span longer than the entire history of the Roman Empire, from founding to fall. Workers across dozens of generations contributed to this structure, each building upon or near the work of ancestors they never knew. Some sections crumbled and were abandoned, while others were just being planned. The wall we picture in our minds is actually a patchwork of construction projects separated by centuries, different dynasties, and evolving military strategies. Millions of laborers died during its construction, and their stories are largely lost. The Great Wall isn't one structure, it's a timeline made, physical, stretching across both geography and history, a monument to persistence, ambition, and the staggering cost of defense. 12. Ancient Romans used urine as mouthwash because of its ammonia content, which acts as a natural bleaching agent for teeth. Public restrooms in Rome had collection vessels where urine was gathered and sold to fullers for cleaning cloth and to individuals for dental hygiene. The ammonia broke down stains and whitened teeth effectively, making it a popular commodity. The practice was so common that Emperor Nero even taxed the urine trade, leading his son Vespasian to defend the tax with the phrase pecunia non olet, meaning money doesn't smell. Romans didn't understand the chemistry, but they recognized the results. They rinsed their mouths with diluted or aged urine, sometimes mixed with other ingredients, as part of their daily routine. To modern sensibilities, it sounds revolting, but in a world without commercial toothpaste or whitening strips, people used what worked. The Romans were intensely practical, and if something delivered results, social taboos didn't matter. It's a reminder that hygiene practices are deeply cultural and contingent on available resources. 13. The Black Death killed between 75 and 200 million people across Eurasia, wiping out an estimated 30 to 60% of Europe's population in just a few years during the mid-14th century. The pandemic arrived via trade routes from Asia, carried by fleas on black rats aboard merchant ships. Entire villages were abandoned, cities lost half their residents. The social order collapsed in many regions as labor shortages gave surviving peasants unprecedented bargaining power. The plague didn't just kill, it restructured economies, weakened feudalism, and accelerated changes that had been brewing for generations. Wages rose, land values shifted. The Catholic Church's authority was questioned as prayers failed to stop the dying. Art became obsessed with death, giving rise to dance macabre imagery. The psychological trauma echoed for centuries. The Black Death is often remembered as a singular catastrophe, but it returned in waves for the next 400 years, a recurring nightmare that shaped European consciousness and development. Few events in history have reshaped civilization so completely and so quickly. 14. Medieval physicians prescribed mummy powder, made from ground-up Egyptian mummies, as medicine well into the 17th century. European doctors believed that the bitumen used in mummification had medicinal properties and that consuming powdered mummy could cure everything from headaches to epilepsy. Demand was so high that a trade network emerged, with traders looting tombs and even creating fake mummies from recently deceased bodies to meet European appetites. Apothecaries sold mummy powder alongside herbs and minerals, and it appeared in medical texts as a legitimate remedy. The practice only declined when European doctors began to question its effectiveness and when supply became inconsistent. By then, countless mummies had been destroyed, ground into powder, and consumed by people seeking cures that never came. It's a grotesque chapter in medical history, revealing how desperation and pseudoscience can drive people to consume the dead. The loss to archaeology and history is incalculable. We'll never know what knowledge was destroyed in pursuit of imaginary cures. 15. Vikings discovered that Greenland wasn't actually green, but Eric the Red named it that as a marketing scheme to attract settlers. After being exiled from Iceland for murder around 982 CE, Eric explored the icy coastline of Greenland and found small areas of relatively habitable land along the fjords. When he returned to Iceland, he deliberately gave the island an appealing name to encourage colonization. The strategy worked. Hundreds of Norse families followed him, establishing settlements that survived for nearly 500 years. Greenland's climate was slightly warmer then, but it was never the lush, green paradise the name suggested. Settlers struggled with harsh winters, limited resources, and isolation. Eventually, cooling temperatures during the Little Ice Age made conditions unbearable, and the Norse abandoned their settlements by the 15th century. Eric's deception worked in the short term, drawing people to a land that couldn't sustain them long term. It's one of history's earliest examples of false advertising, a reminder that exaggeration and spin are not modern inventions. People have always bent the truth to serve their purposes. 16. Medieval manuscripts are filled with bizarre doodles in the margins, including knights fighting giant snails, rabbits jousting on horseback, and monks riding backward on animals. These illustrations, called marginalia, appear alongside serious religious texts, legal documents, and philosophical treatises. Scholars have debated their meaning for centuries. Some suggest they're visual jokes, commentary on the main text, or expressions of scribes' frustration with tedious copying work. Others believe they contain symbolic meanings we no longer understand. The snail, for instance, appears repeatedly as an enemy of knights, possibly representing cowardice, slowness, or an inside joke among medieval readers. The marginalia reveal that medieval people had a sense of humor and weren't as somber as we often imagine. Scribes spent years copying manuscripts by hand in monastery scriptoriums, and these small rebellions of creativity may have been their way of staying sane. The images also remind us that books were rare, expensive objects, and every inch of parchment was valuable. Filling margins with illustrations was both art and efficient use of space. These playful drawings humanize the medieval world, showing that people in the past were just as likely to doodle during boring tasks as we are today. 17. The terracotta army in China contains over 8,000 life-sized soldier sculptures, and each one has unique facial features. Discovered in 1974 by farmers digging a well near Xi'an, the army was buried with China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, around 210 BCE to protect him in the afterlife. No two soldiers are identical. Craftsmen sculpted individual faces, hairstyles, expressions, and body types, suggesting that real soldiers may have served as models. The figures were originally painted in bright colors, though most of the pigment has flaked away over time. The army includes infantry, archers, cavalry, and chariots, arranged in battle formation. Archaeologists estimate that only a fraction of the site has been excavated. The emperor's actual tomb remains unopened, rumored to contain rivers of mercury and booby traps. The scale of the project is staggering. Thousands of workers spent decades creating this underground army, a testament to imperial power and the ancient Chinese belief in an afterlife that mirrored the living world. It's one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. 18. Harvard University was founded in 1636, before calculus was invented by Isaac Newton and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz in the 1670s. When Harvard's first students walked through its gates, mathematics was still rooted in classical geometry and algebra. The revolutionary ideas that would allow humanity to describe motion, change, and the behavior of the universe with precision didn't exist yet. Harvard educated ministers, lawyers, and scholars using texts that were already centuries old. Calculus arrived later, transforming science and engineering and enabling the Industrial Revolution. The gap between Harvard's founding and calculus's invention is a reminder that institutions can outlast entire paradigms of thought. Harvard has now existed through the invention of calculus, the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, the discovery of electricity, the theory of evolution, quantum mechanics, and the digital age. It has adapted and endured while the world transformed around it. Universities are time capsules and engines of change simultaneously, preserving old knowledge while creating new understanding. Harvard's longevity speaks to the enduring value societies place on education, even as what we teach evolves completely. 19. Nintendo was founded in 1889 as a playing card company, a full century before the Game Boy was released in 1989. Fusajiro Yamauchi started the company in Kyoto, Japan, producing handmade Hanafuda cards for gambling and entertainment. For decades, Nintendo remained a small regional business. It wasn't until the 1960s, under the leadership of Yamauchi's great-grandson Hiroshi, that the company began exploring new markets. including toys and eventually electronic games. The shift to video games in the 1970s and 1980s transformed Nintendo into a global entertainment giant. The same company that once printed floral designs on paper cards eventually created Mario, Zelda, and Pokémon. It's a remarkable example of corporate reinvention, showing how businesses can survive by adapting to cultural and technological shifts. Nintendo's longevity across 3 centuries is rare in any industry. Most companies that old are gone or fossilized. Nintendo thrived by abandoning its original product entirely and embracing risk. Its story is a lesson in flexibility, vision, and the importance of knowing when to let go of the past. 20. Medieval Europeans believed that bathing was unhealthy and could open pores to disease, allowing illness to enter the body. Medical texts from the period warned against frequent washing, associating it with moral and physical danger. Queen Elizabeth I of England was considered exceptionally clean by the standards of her time because she bathed once a month, whether she needed it or not, according to historical records. Most people rarely bathed fully, instead using perfumes, powders, and linen undergarments to mask odors. Public bathhouses, common in Roman times, had largely disappeared in medieval Europe, partly due to fears of disease and partly due to associations with sin and immorality. The lack of hygiene contributed to the spread of illnesses, but people didn't make the connection. They believed that bad air or miasma caused disease, not contaminated water or unwashed bodies. This misunderstanding persisted for centuries, only changing with the development of germ theory in the 19th century. Until then, being dirty was considered safer than being clean, a belief that cost countless lives. 21. The Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan had a population in 1519 that numbered in the hundreds of thousands, making it larger than any city in Spain at the time. When Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés first saw the city, he and his men were astonished. Tenochtitlan was built on an island in the middle of Lake Texcoco, connected to the mainland by massive causeways. It featured aqueducts, floating gardens called chinampas, grand pyramids, bustling markets, and sophisticated urban planning. The city's population is estimated to have been between 200,000 and 400,000, while the largest Spanish cities barely reached 100,000. The Aztecs had running water, public sanitation, and a complex social hierarchy. Their capital was cleaner and more organized than most European cities of the era. Yet the Spanish viewed the Aztecs as primitive because they lacked gunpowder, horses, and Christianity. The clash between these civilizations wasn't just military. It was a collision of worldviews, technologies, and diseases. Within 2 years, Tenochtitlan was destroyed, and its stones were used to build Mexico City. The grandeur of the Aztec capital is largely forgotten, buried beneath a modern metropolis. 22. Ancient Romans had central heating systems called hypocausts that circulated warm air beneath floors and through walls. This ingenious technology allowed wealthy Romans to heat their villas and public bathhouses efficiently, even in cold climates. A furnace called a prefurnium burned wood or charcoal, and the hot air traveled through a network of hollow spaces beneath raised floors supported by stacks of tiles. The warm air radiated upward, heating rooms from below. Some systems even included heated walls. Public bathhouses used hypocausts to maintain different temperature zones, allowing bathers to move from hot to warm to cold rooms as part of their bathing ritual. The technology required skilled engineering and constant maintenance, but it provided comfort unmatched in Europe for over 1,000 years after Rome's fall. Central heating didn't return to widespread use until the 19th century. The Romans understood thermal dynamics and applied them with remarkable sophistication. They lived in heated homes, took hot baths daily, and enjoyed a level of domestic comfort that medieval Europeans couldn't imagine. Once again, ancient innovation surpassed what came after. 23. The Palace of Versailles, one of the most opulent royal residences ever built, had no bathrooms. Despite its grandeur with hundreds of rooms, gilded halls, and elaborate gardens, the palace lacked plumbing or dedicated toilets. Nobles used chamber pots, which servants emptied, or they relieved themselves in corridors, behind curtains, and in corners of the palace. The smell was reportedly overwhelming, masked only partially by heavy perfumes. Versailles was designed to showcase the power and wealth of King Louis XIV, but basic sanitation wasn't a priority. Public and private hygiene in 17th and 18th century France was shockingly poor by modern standards. Even royalty lived in conditions that would be considered unsanitary today. The disconnect between aesthetic luxury and practical comfort is striking. Versailles had mirrors, chandeliers, and marble, but no toilets. It wasn't until the 19th century that indoor plumbing became standard in European palaces. Until then, even kings and queens lived with the stench of human waste, a reminder that wealth and cleanliness haven't always gone hand in hand. 24. The oldest surviving musical instrument is a 40,000-year-old flute carved from a vulture's wing bone, discovered in a cave in Germany. This delicate artifact, created during the Upper Paleolithic period, demonstrates that early humans weren't just focused on survival. They made time for music, art, and expression. The flute has carefully carved finger holes and was designed to produce a range of notes, suggesting that its creator understood acoustics and musical scales. Researchers have recreated the flute and played it, producing haunting, melodic sounds that echo across millennia. Music predates agriculture, writing, and cities. It's one of humanity's oldest forms of communication and community bonding. That flute was played by someone who lived in a world of ice, megafauna, and small nomadic groups, yet they had the same impulse to create beauty that we do today. Music connects us across time in ways the few other artifacts can. That 40,000-year-old flute is proof that art isn't a luxury of civilization. It's fundamental to being human. 25. The ancient Greeks developed an early form of computer called the Antikythera mechanism around 150 BCE, used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses. This device was discovered in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece in 1901, and for decades, scientists couldn't understand its purpose or complexity. The mechanism consists of over 30 bronze gears arranged in a wooden case with dials and pointers on the exterior. It could calculate the positions of the sun, moon, and planets, predict eclipses, and even track the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. According to research published in Nature, the Antikythera mechanism represents a level of mechanical sophistication that wouldn't be seen again until medieval clockwork appeared over 1,000 years later. The technology was lost, and nothing comparable existed until the Renaissance. How the Greeks designed such a device remains partially mysterious. It demonstrates that ancient engineering was far more advanced than we often assume. The Antikythera mechanism is a glimpse into a lost world of knowledge, reminding us how much has been forgotten. 26. The Eiffel Tower in Paris was originally intended as a temporary installation with a permit that lasted only 20 years. Designed by engineer Gustave Eiffel for the 1889 Exposition Universelle, the tower celebrated the centennial of the French Revolution. Many Parisians hated it, calling it an eyesore and a metal monstrosity that ruined the city's skyline. Artists and intellectuals signed petitions demanding its removal. The tower was supposed to be dismantled in 1909, but it survived because it proved useful as a radio telegraph station. Its height made it ideal for transmitting signals, and during World War I, it intercepted enemy communications, cementing its value. The tower also became a scientific instrument, used for experiments in meteorology, aerodynamics, and physics. Over time, public opinion shifted. The Eiffel Tower became a beloved symbol of Paris and France, attracting millions of visitors annually. What was once considered ugly and temporary is now iconic and permanent. Its survival was an accident of technology and utility, not aesthetic appreciation. The story of the Eiffel Tower is a reminder that cultural monuments aren't always immediately recognized as such. Sometimes what one generation dismisses, the next embraces. Landmarks can grow into their significance. 27. Medieval castle toilets, known as garderobes, were simple chutes built into the castle walls that dropped waste directly down the exterior into moats, pits, or rivers below. There was no plumbing, no flushing, and no real attempt at sanitation. The name garderobe literally means guard robe, and these small rooms were sometimes used to store clothing, as the ammonia from urine was believed to repel moths. Castles smelled terrible, especially near the base of walls where waste accumulated. During sieges, attackers sometimes scaled walls by climbing up waste chutes, a disgusting but effective infiltration method. The lack of sanitation contributed to disease, and waste contaminated water sources. Medieval people accepted this as normal. They didn't understand germ theory or the connection between filth and illness. Castles, symbols of power and defense, were also monuments to unsanitary living. Even the wealthiest lords lived in conditions we'd find intolerable. It wasn't until centuries later that society began prioritizing hygiene and developing systems to manage waste. Medieval life was rough in ways we rarely consider. 28. The ancient city of Angkor Wat in Cambodia covered approximately 400 square kilometers, making it larger than modern-day Paris. Built in the early 12th century as a Hindu temple complex and later converted to Buddhism, Angkor Wat was the heart of the Khmer Empire, one of Southeast Asia's most powerful civilizations. The city featured intricate stone temples, vast reservoirs called barrays, sophisticated irrigation systems, and dense urban neighborhoods. At its height, Angkor may have housed nearly 1 million people, making it one of the largest pre-industrial cities in the world. The Khmer engineered an elaborate water management system that supported rice agriculture and sustained the population. However, environmental pressures, overuse of resources, and shifting trade routes eventually led to the city's decline. By the 15th century, Angkor was largely abandoned, swallowed by jungle. It remained hidden from the Western world until French explorers rediscovered it in the 19th century. Today, Angkor Wat is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a symbol of Cambodia's cultural heritage. Its scale and sophistication challenge assumptions about what ancient civilizations could achieve. 29. Rome's Pantheon, completed in 126 CE under Emperor Hadrian, remains the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome. The dome spans 142 feet in diameter and features an oculus, a circular opening at the top that lets in light and rain. The Romans engineered the dome using progressively lighter materials as it rises, with heavy stone and brick at the base and lighter pumice near the top. This reduced weight without sacrificing strength. The concrete itself used volcanic ash, which gave it unique properties that allowed it to cure and strengthen over time. The Pantheon has stood for nearly 2,000 years, surviving earthquakes, wars, and the fall of the empire that built it. Modern architects still study its design. No unreinforced concrete dome built since has matched its size. The Pantheon was converted into a Christian church in the 7th century, which likely saved it from being dismantled for building materials, a fate that befell many Roman structures. It's a testament to Roman engineering genius, a structure that outlasted the civilization that created it and continues to inspire awe today. 30. Vikings used crystals known as sunstones to navigate on cloudy days by detecting polarized light. When the sun was hidden by clouds or fog, Viking sailors couldn't rely on its position for navigation. However, certain crystals, likely calcite or Iceland spar, have optical properties that allow them to reveal the direction of polarized sunlight even when the sun isn't visible. By holding the crystal up to the sky and rotating it, Vikings could detect patterns of light polarization and determine the sun's position with remarkable accuracy. This method allowed them to navigate across open oceans, reaching Iceland, Greenland, and even North America centuries before other Europeans. Modern experiments have confirmed that sunstones could work as described in the sagas. The Vikings combined this technology with their knowledge of currents, stars, and wildlife patterns to become some of the most skilled sailors in history. Their navigation techniques were practical, empirical, and effective, enabling exploration and trade across vast distances. The sunstone is a reminder that ancient peoples developed sophisticated technologies, using the materials and knowledge available to them, often achieving results we struggle to replicate today. 31. The ancient city of Pompeii's destruction in 79 CE happened so suddenly and completely that it preserved graffiti, everyday objects, and intimate scenes of daily life in ways no other site has. When Mount Vesuvius erupted, it buried the city under volcanic ash and pumice, entombing everything in place. Archaeologists have uncovered bakeries with loaves of bread still in ovens, taverns with wine amphorae on counters, and homes with meals left on tables. The ash preserved organic materials that normally decay, including wooden furniture, food, and even the shapes of human bodies. Plaster casts made from voids in the ash reveal people frozen in their final moments, some sheltering together, others fleeing. The graffiti on Pompeii's walls offers candid glimpses into Roman life. Love declarations, insults, political slogans, crude jokes, and advertisements. One reads, "I was here," a timeless sentiment. Pompeii wasn't a grand capital or monumental site. It was an ordinary Roman town, which makes it invaluable. We see not the idealized version of Rome that emperors wanted to project, but the real, messy, human reality of daily existence. Disaster became preservation, giving us a snapshot of life 2,000 years ago. 32. The Inca built rope bridges from woven grass that could span gorges over 150 feet wide and support the weight of entire armies. These bridges were engineering marvels, constructed entirely from natural fibers, without nails, wood, or metal. Communities living near each bridge were responsible for its annual maintenance and reconstruction, a task passed down through generations. The bridges swayed in the wind and required courage to cross, but they were essential for the Inca road system, which connected the empire across some of the most challenging terrain on Earth. One of these bridges, the Huachaca Bridge in Peru, is still rebuilt every year using traditional methods, preserving a 500-year-old tradition. The Inca understood tensile, strength, load distribution, and the properties of plant fibers in ways that allowed them to create infrastructure in environments where stone or wood bridges would fail. The bridges were functional and symbolic, representing the interconnectedness of the empire and the collective effort required to maintain it. Spanish conquistadors were amazed and terrified by these bridges, which swung hundreds of feet above rivers. They were a uniquely Andean solution to a uniquely Andean problem. 33. Ancient Egyptians used moldy bread as an early form of antibiotic to treat wounds. They observed that applying certain types of mold to infected cuts helped prevent infection and promoted healing. While they didn't understand the science, they were unknowingly using penicillin, the same antibiotic that wouldn't be formally discovered until Alexander Fleming's work in 1928. Ancient Egyptian medical papyri describe various treatments involving moldy bread and other organic substances applied to wounds. This practice worked because certain molds produce natural antibiotics that kill bacteria. The Egyptians also used honey, which has antimicrobial properties, and a combination of both was particularly effective. Their medical knowledge was empirical, based on trial and error over centuries. They couldn't explain why these treatments worked, but they knew they did. It's a striking example of ancient wisdom that aligns with modern science. For thousands of years, this knowledge was lost or dismissed as superstition, only to be rediscovered in the 20th century. The Egyptians were ahead of their time in ways we're still uncovering. 34. Medieval Europeans believed narwhal tusks were unicorn horns and paid enormous sums for them. These spiral tusks, which are actually elongated teeth from male narwhals, an Arctic whale species, were rare and exotic when they appeared in European markets. Kings, nobles, and the church believed they had magical properties, including the ability to neutralize poison and cure disease. A single tusk could be worth 10 times its weight in gold. The tusks were displayed as treasures, ground into powder for medicinal use, or fashioned into scepters and ceremonial objects. No one had seen a living narwhal in medieval Europe, so the myth of the unicorn persisted unchallenged. Traders who brought the tusks south from Scandinavia and Iceland were happy to perpetuate the legend, as it drove up prices. It wasn't until the 17th century that naturalists began to question the unicorn narrative and identify the tusk's true origin. By then, fortunes had been made and lost trading these horns. The narwhal tusk trade is a reminder of how valuable mystery and rarity can be, and how long myths can endure when they're profitable. 35. The first recorded labor strike in history occurred in ancient Egypt in 1152 BCE, when workers building the tomb of Pharaoh Ramses III stopped working and demanded their overdue payments. These workers, skilled artisans and laborers who lived in the village of Deir el-Medina, were responsible for constructing and decorating the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings. They were usually paid in rations of grain, oil, and other supplies, but delays in payment left them unable to feed their families. Historical records show that the workers organized, refused to work, and staged a sit-in at a nearby temple, demanding to speak with officials. Their protest was effective. Authorities eventually provided the overdue rations, and work resumed. This event demonstrates that labor organization and collective bargaining are not modern inventions. Workers in ancient Egypt understood their leverage and used it to demand fair treatment. The strike was recorded on papyrus and ostraca, preserving the voices of ordinary people standing up for their rights. It's one of the earliest documented examples of workers asserting power against an employer, in this case, the state itself. The struggle for fair wages is ancient. 36. The discovery of the New World after 1492 accelerated massive global silver flows from the Americas to Europe and Asia, fundamentally reshaping the world economy and linking continents in unprecedented ways. Spanish conquistadors found vast silver deposits in places like Potosi in present-day Bolivia and Zacatecas in Mexico. These mines produced enormous quantities of silver, which Spain shipped back to Europe. However, much of this silver continued eastward, flowing to China, where it was in extremely high demand. Chinese merchants accepted silver as payment for silk, porcelain, and tea, creating a trade imbalance that drained European silver reserves. This silver trade connected the economies of Europe, the Americas, Asia, and eventually Africa in a truly global system for the first time. The influx of American silver caused inflation in Europe, altered trade patterns, and funded wars. It also had devastating consequences for indigenous populations, who were enslaved and forced to work in the mines under horrific conditions. Millions died from overwork, disease, and brutal treatment. The silver that built global commerce was extracted through immense human suffering. The economic networks established during this period laid the groundwork for modern globalization, demonstrating that the world economy has been interconnected for centuries, built on the exploitation of resources and people. 37. The ancient Mayans used cacao beans as currency, with standardized values for different goods and services. A slave cost around 100 cacao beans, while a rabbit might cost 10 beans. Cacao was valuable because it grew only in specific climates, was labor-intensive to harvest and process, and was used to make a bitter chocolate beverage consumed by elites during rituals and ceremonies. The beans were portable, relatively durable, and widely recognized across Mayan territories, making them ideal for trade. However, cacao currency had a unique problem. It could be eaten or planted, giving it intrinsic value but also making it perishable compared to metal coins. Counterfeiters filled empty cacao shells with dirt to inflate their apparent wealth, an early form of financial fraud. The use of cacao as money reveals the Mayan economy's sophistication and their understanding of trade, value, and standardization. When the Spanish arrived, they were astonished by the monetary system and quickly recognized cacao's value, integrating it into colonial trade. Chocolate, once a sacred Mayan commodity, became a global luxury, but its origins as money are largely forgotten. 38. The world's first organized police force was established in ancient Egypt around 3000 BCE, tasked with maintaining order, enforcing laws, and protecting trade routes. These early police used trained dogs and monkeys to assist in their duties, patrolling markets, guarding temples, and pursuing criminals. The role was formalized as part of the state's administrative structure, with officers reporting to regional governors. Ancient Egyptian police dealt with theft, assault, tomb robbery, and disputes over property and water rights. They also served as a labor force for state projects when not actively policing. Evidence of their existence comes from administrative records, tomb paintings, and texts that describe their responsibilities. The concept of a dedicated law enforcement body, separate from the military or local militias, was revolutionary, establishing a model that many later civilizations adopted. Police in ancient Egypt were part of a broader effort to centralize power and control under the pharaoh's authority. The institution evolved over millennia, but the fundamental idea that society needs specialized individuals to enforce laws and maintain order originated in the Nile Valley over 5,000 years ago. 39. The Silk Road wasn't actually a single road, but a vast network of trade routes spanning roughly 4,000 miles connecting China to the Mediterranean. These routes passed through deserts, mountains, and steppes, linking cities and cultures across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Merchants rarely traveled the entire distance. Instead, goods changed hands multiple times, passing through intermediaries who specialized in different segments of the journey. Silk, spices, precious metals, gems, glass, paper, and gunpowder moved westward, while gold, silver, wool, and horses traveled eastward. The Silk Road also facilitated the exchange of ideas, religions, technologies, and diseases. Buddhism spread from India to China along these routes. Islamic scholarship reached Europe. The Black Death traveled from Asia to Europe via trade caravans. The Silk Road wasn't controlled by any single empire, though various powers like the Mongols, Persians, and Chinese dynasties exerted influence over sections. It represents one of history's greatest examples of globalization, demonstrating that long-distance trade and cultural exchange have been shaping human civilization for over 2 millennia. The routes declined as maritime trade became dominant, but their legacy endures. 40. The ancient Persian Empire developed a sophisticated postal system around 490 BCE that could deliver messages across 1,677 miles in just 7 to 9 days. Known as the Chapar-Khane system, it used a network of relay stations positioned at regular intervals along the Royal Road, which connected the empire's vast territories from Persia to Anatolia. Mounted couriers would ride at full speed from one station to the next, where fresh horses and riders waited to continue the journey. The system operated day and night, in all weather conditions, ensuring rapid communication between the capital and distant provinces. Greek historian Herodotus famously wrote of the Persian couriers, "Neither snow nor rain, nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds," a phrase later adopted by the U.S. Postal Service. This infrastructure allowed the Persian king to maintain control over a sprawling empire, coordinate military campaigns, and manage administration with unprecedented efficiency. The speed and reliability of the system were unmatched in the ancient world, demonstrating Persian organizational skill and the importance they placed on communication as a tool of governance. 41. The Ottoman Empire officially ended in 1922, meaning it existed well into the 20th century, long after many modern European nation-states had formed. Founded in 1299, the empire lasted over 600 years, controlling vast territories across 3 continents at its height. By the early 1900s, it was known as the sick man of Europe, weakened by internal strife, economic decline, and territorial losses. The empire entered World War I on the side of the Central Powers and suffered devastating defeat. In the aftermath, the empire was dismantled by the victorious Allies, and its territories were divided. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk led a nationalist movement that abolished the Sultanate in 1922 and established the Republic of Turkey in 1923. The last Sultan, Mehmed II, fled into exile. The Ottoman Empire's end marked the close of one of history's longest-lasting empires and the beginning of the modern Middle East's political landscape. Its dissolution created borders, conflicts, and power vacuums still influencing global politics today. The fact that the empire persisted into the era of automobiles, airplanes, and cinema is a reminder that history's timelines are more fluid than we often think. 42. The shortest war in history lasted between 38 and 45 minutes. On August 27, 1896, the Anglo-Zanzibar War erupted when Sultan Khalid bin Bargash refused to step down after the British-favored Sultan died. The British issued an ultimatum: abdicate by 9 a.m. or face bombardment. When the deadline passed, British warships opened fire on the Sultan's palace. Within minutes, the palace was in ruins, and the Sultan fled to the German consulate. Approximately 500 of the Sultan's defenders were killed or wounded, while only 1 British sailor sustained an injury. The conflict ended before most wars even begin. The British installed their preferred ruler, and Zanzibar became a protectorate. The entire confrontation demonstrated the overwhelming technological and military superiority that colonial powers wielded during the scramble for Africa. It's a stark reminder that wars aren't always prolonged struggles. Sometimes they're over before anyone has time to process what's happening, leaving only devastation and a footnote in history books. 43. Chocolate was consumed as a bitter beverage for roughly 90% of its history, with sugar only being added after the 16th century when Europeans encountered cacao in the Americas. The ancient Maya and Aztec civilizations prepared chocolate as a frothy drink, often mixed with chili peppers, vanilla, and other spices. It was consumed during religious ceremonies, served to warriors before battle, and offered to gods. The taste was intense, earthy, and far from the sweet treat we know today. When Spanish conquistadors brought cacao back to Europe, it initially remained bitter, consumed by elites as an exotic luxury. According to historical records from Spanish colonial accounts, it wasn't until someone, possibly monks in Spain, thought to sweeten it with cane sugar that chocolate began its transformation into a popular dessert. The addition of sugar changed everything, making chocolate palatable to a broader audience, and eventually leading to the chocolate bars, candies, and desserts that define the modern chocolate industry. For millennia, chocolate was sacred and medicinal. Sweetness came late, but it's what made chocolate a global phenomenon. 44. Ancient Roman roads covered over 250,000 miles across their empire, a network extensive enough to circle the Earth 10 times. These roads were engineering marvels, constructed with multiple layers of stone, gravel, and sand to ensure durability and drainage. Many Roman roads are still in use today, either as modern roads built over ancient foundations or as preserved archaeological sites. The roads enabled rapid movement of armies, facilitating Rome's military dominance and allowing legions to respond quickly to threats across vast distances. They also supported trade, communication, and cultural integration, connecting Rome to the farthest reaches of its empire from Britain to the Middle East. Merchants, officials, and travelers used the roads, benefiting from milestones that marked distances and way stations that provided rest and supplies. The phrase, "all roads lead to Rome," reflects the centrality of the capital and the efficiency of this network. Roman road construction techniques were so advanced that they weren't surpassed until the modern era. The roads outlasted the empire itself, continuing to shape European geography, trade routes, and city locations for centuries after Rome's fall. Infrastructure, once built well, endures. 45. The Taj Mahal, completed in the mid-17th century, was built by Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan as a mausoleum for his beloved wife, Mumtaz Mahal, who died during childbirth. The structure is a masterpiece of architecture, blending Persian, Indian, and Islamic design elements into a harmonious whole. It took over 20,000 workers and craftsmen more than 20 years to complete. The white marble exterior is inlaid with semi-precious stones in intricate floral and geometric patterns, and the building's symmetry is nearly perfect. The Taj Mahal changes appearance throughout the day, glowing pink at dawn, brilliant white at noon, and golden at sunset, a testament to the skill of its designers. The mausoleum sits within a vast garden complex, symbolizing paradise as described in Islamic texts. Shah Jahan intended it as an eternal monument to love, but his grief was so consuming that he was eventually overthrown by his son and imprisoned in a nearby fort, where he could only gaze at the Taj Mahal from a distance. The monument has become one of the most recognizable symbols of India and a UNESCO World Heritage Site, visited by millions. It stands as proof that love, loss, and art can create something timeless. 46. The first universities established during the Islamic Golden Age, such as Al-Qarawiyyin, founded in 859 CE, preserved and advanced knowledge in science, medicine, philosophy, and mathematics during Europe's medieval period, when scholarship had declined in much of the Christian West. These institutions were centers of learning that attracted students from across the Islamic world and beyond. Scholars translated and studied Greek and Roman texts, preventing their loss and building upon them. Figures like Al-Khwarizmi developed algebra, a word derived from Arabic. Ibn al-Haytham made groundbreaking contributions to optics and the scientific method. Hospitals attached to universities trained physicians, and observatories advanced astronomy. The Islamic Golden Age, roughly spanning the 8th to 14th centuries, was a period of extraordinary intellectual and cultural flourishing. While Europe was recovering from the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, the Islamic world was innovating. This knowledge eventually flowed back into Europe through Spain, Sicily, and the Crusades, sparking the Renaissance. The narrative that the Middle Ages were uniformly dark is Eurocentric and inaccurate. In much of the world, this period was brilliant. The universities of the Islamic Golden Age remind us that the torch of knowledge has been carried by many civilizations, and progress is neither linear nor confined to one culture. 47. Turkeys were domesticated in Mexico over 2,000 years ago, long before Europeans arrived in the Americas. The Aztecs and other Mesoamerican cultures raised turkeys for food and used their feathers for ceremonial purposes. Turkeys were one of the few domesticated animals in the pre-Columbian Americas, alongside dogs and guinea pigs. When Spanish conquistadors encountered turkeys, they brought the birds back to Europe, where they became popular. Ironically, when English settlers arrived in North America in the 17th century, they found wild turkeys and assumed they were discovering a new species, unaware that Europeans had been eating domesticated versions for nearly a century. The turkey's journey from Mexico to Europe and back to North America is a convoluted tale of colonialism, trade, and misunderstanding. Today, turkeys are synonymous with American Thanksgiving, but their origins lie in indigenous Mexican agriculture. The bird's name itself is confusing. Europeans initially confused turkeys with guinea fowl imported via Turkish merchants, leading to the name turkey, even though the bird has nothing to do with Turkey the country. The story of the turkey is a reminder that the foods we consider traditional often have complex global histories. 48. The first vending machine was invented in ancient Alexandria, around 215 BCE, by the Greek engineer Hero of Alexandria, and it dispensed holy water. The machine was placed in temples to prevent people from taking more than their fair share. When a coin was inserted into a slot, it would land on a lever, tipping it and opening a valve that released a measured amount of water. Once the coin slid off the lever, the valve closed, stopping the flow. It was a simple but effective mechanism that relied on gravity and mechanical ingenuity. Hero of Alexandria is also credited with inventing the first steam engine, automatic doors, and various other mechanical devices that were far ahead of their time. His inventions were often seen as curiosities or toys rather than practical tools, and most didn't see widespread use. The vending machine concept lay dormant for centuries, not reappearing in a practical form until the 19th century in England. The fact that the first vending machine was designed to distribute something as mundane as holy water shows how innovation often arises from the need to solve everyday problems, even in religious contexts. Hero's work demonstrates that ancient ingenuity often anticipated modern technology by millennia. 49. The oldest known written recipe is for beer, recorded by ancient Sumerians around 3900 BCE on clay tablets. The recipe, part of a hymn to the goddess Ninkasi, who oversaw brewing, describes the process of making beer from barley bread. The Sumerians soaked barley, allowed it to germinate, dried it, and then mixed it with water and baked it into cakes. These cakes were crumbled into water, fermented and filtered, producing a thick, nutritious beverage. Beer was a staple of the Sumerian diet, consumed daily by people of all social classes. It was safer to drink than water, which was often contaminated, and it provided calories and nutrients. Workers were sometimes paid in beer, and it was used in religious rituals and offerings to the gods. The fact that the earliest recipe we have is for beer rather than bread or stew reflects the importance of fermentation in ancient life. Beer wasn't just a drink, it was sustenance, currency, and a social lubricant. The recipe being written as a hymn also shows that brewing was considered sacred, a gift from the gods. Humanity has been brewing beer for at least 6,000 years, making it one of our oldest culinary traditions. 50. The first known recipe for soap comes from ancient Babylon, dating back to around 2800 BCE. The recipe, inscribed on clay tablets, describes a mixture of water, alkali, and cassia oil, boiled together to create a cleaning substance. The Babylonians used soap for washing wool and cotton used in textile production rather than for personal hygiene. Soap as a body cleanser came later. The chemistry of soap, which involves fats reacting with alkali to form molecules that attract both water and oils, allows it to lift dirt and grease from surfaces. Ancient Egyptians also made soap using vegetable oils and alkaline salts, and the Romans later adopted and spread the practice throughout their empire. Interestingly, despite having soap, Romans preferred bathing in oils and scraping off dirt with a tool called a strigil. Soap for bathing didn't become common in Europe until much later, partly due to the medieval belief that bathing was unhealthy. The recipe from Babylon is a reminder that cleanliness technologies have existed for millennia, but their adoption and use vary widely across cultures and time periods. Soap is such a mundane part of modern life that we forget it required discovery and refinement over thousands of years. And there you have it, 50 fascinating facts about history that stretch from ancient civilizations to the modern world. These facts remind us that the past isn't a distant, disconnected place. It's the foundation we're standing on, filled with people who faced challenges, made discoveries, and left legacies that still shape our world. If you enjoyed this journey through time, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more explorations of the fascinating, surprising, and sometimes shocking truths hidden in history. Drop a comment below with your favorite fact from today's list, or let me know what topic you'd love to see us cover next. Thank you so much for watching. History is vast, endlessly surprising, and always worth exploring. I'll see you in the next video.